You got to deal with this climate change issue. And I know that, there are some people who think climate change is a hoax. It ain't a hoax. I think the last 10 years have been the warmest on record.
First of all, the reality is that the Earth's temperature has never been static, right? We could both agree on that. It's always been up and down. There's been ice ages and heat waves. And then the Washington Post looked at it. What was the time period that they looked at? That essentially they found that we're in a cooling period. That the Earth over the past X amount of years, and this was like a very inconvenient discovery, but they had to report the data, and kudos to them for doing that. Scientists have captured the Earth's climate change over the last 485 million years. Here's the surprising place we stand now. So look at the far end of that graph, and you see we're in a cooling period.
Well, I'm not sure. I didn't read that article, but
Yeah.
The scientists who are out there, I think...
I know, but there's a lot of money involved in that too, Bernie. That's part of the problem.
Joe Rogan just blasted Bernie Sanders for his glaring hypocrisy, and the internet is in flames. Conservatives and critics are jumping in, tearing into the so-called progressive icon for his blatant double standards, and it's been nothing short of explosive. Honestly, putting this video together was a blast. So, hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it. Here's the setup.
What about the other the other lawsuit with the conversation that they had with Kamala Harris, where they edited the answers that she had to make it look more precise?
60 Minutes, they were suing 60 Minutes.
Yes.
Is, to my mind, historically, been around for a very long time. They're not infallible, but I think you look at most objective people will say 60 Minutes has a sterling reputation for investigative journalism. Are they wrong?
But that's not investigative journalism if you change someone's answers. If you ask her a question and she comes with a rambling answer that doesn't make sense, and you edit that out and insert another answer to a different question that seems more
Okay, so this is the clip that set Bernie Sanders on fire. You've probably seen it already, so I won't bore you with a replay. But if you haven't, scroll through our videos and check out my full response to Sanders' hypocrisy. Let's be real though, no one's surprised. This is a guy who claims to fight against the oligarchy, but lives like one. Private jets, elite connections, and a comfy political career. He talks like a revolutionary, but lives like the establishment. When this clip dropped, the backlash was fast, harsh, and totally deserved. But do you know the moment that made everything explode? It was when Joe Rogan schooled him on global warming.
Deal with this climate change issue. And I know that, there are some people who think climate change is a hoax. It ain't a hoax. I think the last 10 years have been the warmest on record.
First of all, the reality is that the Earth's temperature has never been static, right? We could both agree on that. It's always been up and down. There's been ice ages and heat waves. And then the Washington Post looked at it. What was the time period that they looked at? That essentially they found that we're in a cooling period. That the Earth over the past X amount of years, and this was like a very inconvenient discovery, but they had to report the data, and kudos to them for doing that. Scientists have captured the Earth's climate change over the last 485 million years. Here's the surprising place we stand now. So look at the far end of that graph, and you see we're in a cooling period.
Well, I'm not sure. I didn't read that article, but
Yeah.
The scientists who are out there, I think...
I know, but there's a lot of money involved in that too, Bernie. That's part of the problem.
Getting called out on the Joe Rogan podcast triggered a massive storm of backlash for Bernie Sanders online, and it's easy to see why. This is a man who never stops preaching about climate change, warning everyone of the impending disaster. Yet, he's been caught flying around in a private plane, burning fossil fuels like there's no tomorrow. That alone screams hypocrisy. Now, people are questioning his real agenda. Why push so hard for climate action while directly contributing to the problem you're fighting against? Joe Rogan connected the dots. He didn't just call out the hypocrite, dug deeper. Rogan suggested that the climate change panic isn't always about saving the Earth. It's also about money, power, and influence. Raising alarms brings in funds, increases political capital, and gives people like Bernie a platform to promote their agenda while profiting off of fear. Suddenly, it all makes sense. So, let's tone down the criticism.
Last thing,
Alyssa Slotkin, senator from Michigan, she said you shouldn't be using oligarch. It's over people's head. You've gotten criticized from other people. Free Beacon says Bernie Sanders spent $221,000 on private jets fighting the oligarchy tour, paid for by friends of Bernie Sanders. That you've spent millions of dollars in campaign funds on private jet travel over the years. How do you push back on both of those things?
When's the last time you saw Donald Trump during a campaign mode at National Airport?
Ugh. Are we not tired of this old trick? Every time Bernie Sanders gets caught in a contradiction, he pulls out the Trump card like it's some magic shield to deflect attention. But the question is painfully simple. How can you claim to be fighting the oligarchy while flying in private jets? Jets that are either financed by your own wealth or by your cozy oligarch friends. And how can you call yourself an environmental champion while your lifestyle is contributing to the very problem you're supposedly fixing? Instead of owning up to the hypocrisy, what does Bernie do? He deflects to Trump, pretending that pointing fingers is the same as taking responsibility, but people are seeing through it now. This isn't about Trump. This is about Bernie Sanders. A man who talks like a revolutionary but lives like the elite. The double standard couldn't be clearer. That's why people are quick to label him a hypocrite. He justifies his lavish lifestyle, yet demonizes others for indulging in the same comforts. It's a classic case of rules for thee, but not for me. And the audacity, yes, the sheer audacity when he openly stated he has no regrets about using private jets. Think about that for a second. No remorse, no apology. But he expects the rest of us to cut emissions, drive electric cars, skip flights, and basically, change our lives for the sake of climate responsibility. He wants to be celebrated as a climate hero while living like a carbon-emitting king. It's not just hypocrisy, it's elitism disguised as activism. And people are finally waking up to the scam. So, the criticism kept coming.
Oh, so Bernie has important to do, guys. You think Bernie Sanders should wait? You think Bernie Sanders should wait in line? Everyone else that's waiting in line at United, they have nothing to do. They have nothing important. They have no important business meeting to do. They have no important, they're going to fly to see grandma one last time. That's not important. He's a politician, guys. So why should he have to? On top of the fact that the amount of CO2 he is putting into the atmosphere is that Bernie Sanders has put into the atmosphere in all of the private flights he has taken is way more than I've taken 2 private flights in my life, and I don't feel guilty for either one of them, okay? But he is the one that's trying to guilt you while telling you you're destroying the environment, and how am I supposed to do it? I'm an important person, blah, blah, blah. You're a peon. He is the perfect living example of the hypocrisy and endless bull that is a Democrat socialist.
Rubin fired back with a killer question. He asked, "Do the rest of us flying commercial not have anything important to do?" It was a mic drop moment. Because let's be real, Bernie Sanders acts like he's the only one whose time, money, or mission matters. Like he's the only one who deserves to fly private or amass wealth. While the rest of us should feel guilty for chasing success or convenience. This elitist mindset is exactly what people are fed up with. Sanders presents himself as the moral compass for the working class, but lives like the very people he criticizes. And that's the core issue. It's not about climate, fairness, or justice, it's about control and optics. And honestly, this is what the Democratic playbook has become. Performative outrage, grandstanding speeches, and virtue signals with no real-world consistency. It's just a show, not leadership. And people are starting to see through it.
Doing now is speaking to the American people and saying you have got to be involved in this process, because if you are not, the planet that we're going to leave to our kids and our grandchildren will be significantly less habitable. 5 rallies in a week. The only way you can get around to talk to 30,000 people. Think I'm going to be sitting on a waiting line at United, waiting, 30,000 people are waiting? That's the only way you can get around. No apologies for that. That's what campaign travel is about. We've done it in the past. We're going to do it in the...
So, here's Bernie Sanders once again preaching about saving the planet, while he's out there doing the complete opposite. It's almost laughable, if it weren't so insulting. The man who lectures us about carbon footprints is racking up sky miles, in a private jet, like it's a status symbol. But what's even more depressing is that people still buy into it. They fall for the polished image of him as the people's champion, oblivious to the glaring contradictions. Let's not forget, this is the same guy who spent years railing against millionaires, calling them the root of all problems. But as soon as he became one himself, suddenly being rich wasn't all that bad. His tune switched overnight. Now, he's targeting billionaires because that's where the next round of applause lies. It's a constant game of moving the goalposts, designed to keep the outrage alive and the donations flowing. Sadly, many are still falling for it.
I don't have those details. I don't know that I agree with your analysis of it. I don't know enough.
I think that's universally accepted that that's what they did.
And you got to tell me why he is suing ABC. Why are you suing Meta?
Let's just talk about the 60 Minutes
No,
one
but
first.
no, but it's not just
We can
60.
go to ABC, but I'm not aware of that
Well,
one either.
George Stephanopoulos said something that he didn't like. But the point is,
What did Stephanopoulos say?
I can't remember. It was I honestly don't remember. But
Well, I think what he was saying was factually incorrect about the results of one of Trump's trials.
right, guess what? If I were to sue everybody who said things that were factually incorrect about me, I'd be suing people zillion.
Here, Joe Rogan expertly exposes Bernie Sanders' glaring hypocrisy when Sanders claimed that Donald Trump suing 60 Minutes for editing Kamala Harris's interview was an attack on the free press. But here's the real question Rogan should have asked. What if the media had edited a Trump interview to make him sound more coherent than he really was? Would Sanders still defend the sanctity of journalism? We all know the answer. Just imagine the steam coming out of Bernie's ears. He'd be on every news outlet within the hour, railing against the media for spreading propaganda and accusing Trump of conspiring with the press to deceive the public. The outrage would be explosive. But when it's a Democrat being propped up or protected by the media, Sanders suddenly becomes their biggest cheerleader. This isn't about defending journalism, it's about wielding it as a weapon when it suits his agenda. Rogan didn't just catch him off guard. He held up a mirror to the hypocrisy that Sanders refuses to see. And that only added fuel to the critics.
So Bernie's arguments get wrecked when his facts get checked. Our video of the day comes from the Joe Rogan podcast, where Bernie Sanders stopped by to remind the world he's 7,000 years old. And that's almost as old as Greg's jokes about the
Look, we're not here to shame the guy. The issue isn't that Bernie Sanders is old. It's that, with age, we should expect wisdom, clarity, and the maturity to rise above the political theatrics and performative virtue signaling. After all these years in politics, he should have left behind the hypocrisy and double standards and embraced the role of a true statesman, someone who leads with honesty and consistency. But what do we see? The same tired script, the same deflections, the same contradictions. Instead of standing as an example of integrity, Sanders continues to speak from both sides of his mouth. He calls for justice while hobnobbing with elites, pushes for climate action while jet-setting, and rants about media manipulation only when it benefits his party. It's disheartening. For someone with decades of experience and influence, Sanders should be setting the bar, not crawling under it.
Run for president again?
I am 83 years of age.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm not sure the American people will be enthusiastic when somebody's 108.
You're still very with it.
Thank you.
You are.
Okay.
I mean, you're a couple years older than Biden,
Yeah.
right? Think of that.
Yeah.
You could be off a lot worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I haven't seen a pause that awkward since they told Greg he was too short to ride Space Mountain.
I genuinely hope Bernie Sanders chooses not to run for president, not just for his own sake, but for the sake of the Democratic Party. At this point, stepping aside would be the wiser, more dignified choice. The last thing the Democrats need right now is another woke, self-righteous figurehead who talks a big game but does the opposite. A leader who claims to fight the system while embodying everything wrong with it. The public is tired of slogans, without substance, and Sanders has become the face of that disconnection. His campaign would only reignite culture war theatrics and widen the rift within his party. Even worse, his hypocrisy would make him an easy target for critics, distracting from the real issues. The Democrats need authentic, forward-thinking leadership, not recycled ideas wrapped in contradictions. If Bernie truly believes in the future he once championed, it's time for him to step aside and pass the torch. And with that, we'll wrap up today's video. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.